Hey, happy Friday, everybody. All right, so I'm just going to explain to you guys what you are responsible for today. We're going to do two things. The first thing that we're going to do is you're going to read a little bit from the story, Among the Hidden. After you guys are finished with that, you guys will be working on a Socrative related to this. After the Socrative, the last thing that we're going to do is just make sure that we finish up the Pixton. Okay, that Pixton is going to be due on Monday. Okay. All right, so I'm going to start reading. Make sure that you guys are paying attention. All right, so one cool, rainy morning, a few weeks later, Luke's family left in such a rush they barely had time to say goodbye. They dashed out the door after breakfast. Matthew and Mark complaining about their packed lunches. Dad calling back, "I'm going to that auction up at Childsville." Now, if you think about it, why are Matthew and Mark complaining about their packed lunches? Okay, so what you should be thinking about is, oh yeah, their mom is no longer doing that anymore, so that's probably going to be a little bit of a pain for them. Won't be home until supper. Mother hurried back and handed Luke a bag of cracklings. Cracklings are what you guys know as chicharrones, and three pears and some biscuits from the night before. She muttered, "So you won't get hungry," and gave him a quick kiss on the head. Then she was gone too. Remember, she has to work now. Luke peeked around their stairway door, surveying the chaos of dirty pans and crumb-covered plates left in the kitchen. He knew not to look out as far as the window, but he did anyway. His heart gave a strange jump when he saw the window was covered. Now, why was he be given a jump? Someone must have pulled the shade the night before to try to keep the kitchen warm and then forgot to raise it in the morning. Luke dared to lean out a little further. Yes, the shade was down on the other window, too. For the first time in almost 6 months, he could step out of the kitchen and not worry about being seen. He could run, skip, jump, dance, even on the vast linoleum without fear. He could clean up the kitchen and surprise Mother. He could do anything. He put his right foot out tentatively, not quite daring to put his full weight on it. The floor squeaked. He froze. Nothing happened, but he retreated anyway. He went back up the stairs, crawled along the second floor hallway to avoid the windows, then climbed the stairs to the attic. He was so disgusted with himself he could taste it. So what you saw there is he got scared, right? He heard a noise and ran away. And again, it's because of this whole change into the situation he's so afraid. I'm a coward, I'm a chicken, I deserve to be locked away in the attic forever. And again, notice this is all italicized because it's his inner thinking. He ran through his head. No, no, he countered himself. I'm cautious, I'm making a plan. He climbed up onto the stool on the top of the trunk that served as his perch for watching out the back fence. The neighborhood behind his house was fully occupied now. He knew all the families and had come up with names for most of them. The big Carr family had 4 expensive cars sitting in their driveway. The Gold family all had hair the color of sunshine. The Birdbrain family had set a row of their 30 birdhouses along their backyard fence, even though Luke could have told him it was pointless to do that until spring. The house he could see best, right behind the gardener's backyard, was occupied by the Sports family. 2 teenage boys lived there, and their deck overflowed with soccer balls, baseball bats, tennis rackets, basketballs, hockey sticks, and apparatus from games Luke could only guess at. Today he wasn't interested in games. He was interested in seeing the families leave. He had noticed before that all the houses were empty by 9 in the morning, with kids off to school and grown-ups off to work. 3 or 4 of the women didn't seem to have jobs, but they left too, returning late in the afternoon with shopping bags. Today he just had to make sure no one was staying home sick. The Gold family had left first, 2 blonde heads in one car, 2 blonde heads in another. The Sports family was next, the boys carrying football pads and helmets, their mother teetering on high heels. Then there was a flurry of cars streaming from every driveway onto the still sparkling new streets. Luke counted each person, keeping track so carefully that he made scratches on the wall, and counted the scratches twice again at the end. Yep, 28 people. Gone. He was safe. Luke scrambled down from his chair, his head spinning with plans. First he'd clean up the kitchen, then he'd start some bread for supper. He'd never made bread before, but he'd watched Mother a million times. Then maybe he could pull the shades in the rest of the house and clean thoroughly. He couldn't vacuum. That'd be too loud. But he could dust and scrub and polish. Mother would be so pleased. In the afternoon, before Matthew or Mark or the kids in the neighborhood got back, he could put something on for supper. Maybe potato soup. Why, he could do this every day. He'd never considered housework or cooking particularly thrilling before. Matthew and Mark always scoffed at it as women's work, but it was better than nothing. And maybe, just maybe, if this worked, he could convince Dad to let him sneak out into the barn and help there too. Luke was so excited he stepped into the kitchen without a second thought this time. Who cared if the floor creaked? Nobody was here to hear it. He gathered up the dishes from the table and he piled them into the sink, scrubbing everything with extraordinary zeal. He measured out flour and lard and milk and yeast and was putting it in all a bowl when it occurred to him that it might be okay to turn on the radio. Very softly. Nobody would hear. And if they did, they'd just figure the family had forgotten to turn it off just as they'd forgotten to raise the shades. The bread was in the oven and Luke was picking up lint by hand from the living room when he heard tires in the gravel driveway. It was 2 o'clock in the afternoon, too early for the school bus or mother or dad. Luke sprinted for the stairs, hoping whoever it was would go away. No luck. He heard the side door creaking open, then Dad exclaimed, "What the?" He was back early. That shouldn't matter, but hiding on the staircase, Luke suddenly felt like the radio was as loud as an entire orchestra, like the smell of baking bread could fill 3 counties. "Luke!" Dad yelled. Luke heard his father's hands on the doorknob. He opened the door. I was just trying to help," Luke blubbered. "I was safe. You left the shades down, so I thought it was okay, and I made sure everyone was gone from the neighborhood inn." Dad glared. "You can't be sure," he snapped. "People like that, they get deliveries all the time. They get sick. They come home from work. They have maids coming during the day." Luke could have protested. No, the maids never came before the kids got home from school, but he didn't want to give himself away any more than he already had. "The shades were down," he said. "I didn't turn on a single light. Even if there were 1,000 people back there, nobody would know I was here. Please, I've just got to do something. Look, I made bread and cleaned up, and what if a government inspector or somebody had stopped by here? I would have hidden like always." Dad was shaking his head. "And leave them smelling bread baking in an empty house? You don't seem to understand. You can't take any chances. You can't because—" At that precise moment, the buzzer on the oven went off, sounding as loud as a siren. Notice that's an example of assembly there. Dad gave Luke a dirty look and he stalked over to the oven. He pulled out the 2 bread pans and tossed them on the stovetop. He flipped off the radio. "I don't want you in the kitchen again," he said. "You stay hidden. That's an order." He went out the door without looking back. Luke fled up the stairs. He wanted to stomp angrily, but he couldn't. No noise allowed. In his room, he hesitated, too upset to read, too restless to do anything else. He kept hearing, "You stay hidden. That's an order," echoing in his ears. But he'd been hidden. He'd been careful. To prove his point to himself at last, he climbed up back on his perch by the back fence and he looked out the quiet neighborhood. All the driveways were empty. Nothing moved. Not even the flag on the Gold family's flagpole or the spokes on the Birdbrand's family's fake windmill. Then, out the corner of his eye, Luke caught a glimpse of something behind one window of the sports family's house. A face. A child's face. In a house where 2 boys already lived. Luke was so surprised he lost his balance and almost fell backwards off the trunk. By the time he recovered and righted himself, the face was gone. Had he imagined it? Was it just one of the sports family's brothers home early from school? Kids got sick like Dad said, or they decided to play hooky. Luke tried to remember every detail of the face he'd seen or thought he'd seen. It had been younger than either of the sports family's brothers, softer, hadn't it? Maybe it was a thief or a maid come early. No, it had been a child. Uh, he didn't even let himself think what another child in that house would be. He stared for hours at the sports family's house, but no face reappeared. Nothing happened until 6 when the 2 sports family's boys drove in their Jeep, unloaded their football gear, and carried it into the house. They didn't run out screaming about being robbed, and he didn't see no thief. He'd seen no maid leave. At 6:30, Luke reluctantly climbed down from his perch when he heard his mom knocking on the door. He sat down on his bed and muttered distracted, "Come in." She rushed to hug him. "Now, why do you think she's doing that?" "Hmm. Luke, I'm sorry. I know you were just trying to help, and everything's amazingly clean. I'd love it if you could just do this every day, but your father thinks, you can't." Luke was so busy thinking about the face in the window that at first he couldn't figure out what she was talking about. "Oh, the bread, the house cleaning, the radio." "That's okay," Luke mumbled. But it wasn't. It never would be. His anger came back. Why did his parents have to be so careful? Why didn't they just lock him in one of those trunks in the attic and be done with it? Obviously, this is a hyperbole. "Can't you just talk to him?" Luke asked. "Can't you convince him?" Mother pushed Luke's hair back from his face. "I'll try, but he's just trying to protect you. We can't take any chances. Even if the face in the window of the sports family's house was another third child, so what? Luke and the other kid could live right next door all their lives and never meet. Luke might never see this other kid again, and he'd certainly never see Luke." Luke lowered his head. "What am I supposed to do?" he asked. "There's nothing for me to do, and I'm supposed to just sit in this room the rest of my life?" Mother was just stroking his hair now. It made him feel itchy and irritable. Oh, Lukey, she said, you can do so much. You read and play and sleep whenever you want. Believe me, I'd like to live a day of your life right about now. No, you wouldn't, Luke muttered. But he said it was so softly he was sure his mom couldn't hear. He knew she wouldn't understand. If there was a child in the sports family, would he understand? Did he feel the way that Luke did? All right, so now what you guys are going to do is you're going to go onto Socrative, right? This is Socrative code, right? 2037 AEC7. Okay, so there's some questions there for you to answer about this chapter. Now, also, remember, you guys have to complete this Pixton activity. Okay, this is due on Monday, right? So make sure that you have all of these different elements for the story completed. You have to have it for uniformity, sameness, no free will, corrupt government, unexpected hero, segregation or unequal power, and then the hidden secret. Okay, so again, this is also due on Monday. All right, guys, see you Monday.